we are at 3:15. Would you like to introduce yourself, or shall I read this little sentence I have about you?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, you are the Community Outreach Coordinator and Hospital Liaison for Dakota Lions Sight and Health. And that's all I have, so you have to tell us more.
Yes, it is great to be here. And I want to thank everybody for taking a few moments out of your day to learn a little more about donation. As you had said, my name is Chad Hoyler, and my official title is Community Outreach Coordinator, but I'm also one of the hospital liaisons. What that means is basically I travel around South Dakota, North Dakota, Western Minnesota, and Northern Nebraska, and I give PowerPoint presentations. My job is to go and visit with driver's ed students. I go into high schools and I teach biology and anatomy classes about donation. I also go onto college campuses and work with nursing students. And then I also have 53 hospitals that I'm responsible for because national regulation says every hospital must offer donation training to their nursing staff at least once a year. So I'm also responsible for that. So I spend a lot of time on the road. Absolutely love what I do. But today I'm going to share a little bit with you about donation and the part of healthcare that really doesn't garner a lot of attention. What happens when somebody's a designated donor and they decide they want to leave a part of themselves behind to help out a complete stranger? When people ask me what I do for a living, I'm quick to point out that I get to work with heroes. And I really, truly believe that. Because for somebody to make that decision that they want to leave a part of themselves behind so a complete stranger can have a better life, for me, that's the definition of a hero. So Dakota Lions Sight and Health, I don't know how many of you are aware of what we do, but we are an eye and tissue bank. Now, this is actually our office in Sioux Falls. We're right across the street from where Ollie's located. And we also have offices in Rapid City, Bismarck, and Fargo. I've been told it looks a lot like a bank. I did ask once. I said, has anybody come in thinking it's a bank? And it's only happened once. So that was several years ago. That was actually before I came on staff. But this is the area that we are responsible for. Every hospital in the United States has to have two contracts. They have to have a contract with an organ procurement organization, which for this area is a firm out of Minneapolis. It's called LifeSource. They cover both Dakotas, all of Minnesota, and the western four counties of Wisconsin. Every hospital also has to have an eye and tissue procurement contract. That's us. This is the area we are responsible for. So if anyone passes away in that colored shaded area, we are the ones responsible for going out and doing the recovery, except when it's an organ donation. Doesn't happen as often as people think. I'll talk a little more about that later on in the presentation, but eye and tissue donation happening all the time. In fact, corneas, which happens to be our specialty, it's the clear part in the front of your eye. It's the most common thing that is recovered and transplanted all around the world. Out of our office in Sioux Falls, we have sent corneas to 36 different countries, and that number continues to grow each and every year. So this is what we provide. Dakota Lions Sight and Health offers eye and tissue donation options. So as I said, the cornea, that is our specialty. That is what we keep, we process in-house, we send out directly to eye surgeons. Now, tissue donation, we also recover things like skin, bones, nerves, veins, tendons, ligaments, organs, if they're not going to be transplanted. Those things get sent to other processors who specialize in that area. But for us, we are the specialists when it comes to cornea. That's what we keep and we process in-house. Now, birth tissue. This is something that's relatively new. There is so much happening in the world of research. You can't believe it. Up until a few years ago, birth tissue, the placenta, the umbilical cord, and the amniotic fluid was just discarded as medical waste. Well, because of research, they have figured out a way to take those three items and process them into what's called patches. That's the first picture that you see up on the screen. That's a patch. And that patch will be used to speed up the healing process for burn victims, also those battling skin cancer. It's used for certain eye surgeries. So, research is an area where when I go out and talk to young students, I tell them research, the sky's the limit. It's amazing what's happening in the area of donation research. Education and research opportunities. I go out and I'll visit with anyone who's willing to open the door and let me in to talk about donation and the need for more recipients and the need for more donors. We are always in need of more donors. Now, we are very fortunate. We have some of the highest donation numbers in the entire country. The national average is 49%. We're at 62% in this part of the country. So the next time you're at a big event, you see this large crowd, look at it, think of it this way. Out of every 10 people you see, 6 of those people are registered donors. And so that we're very grateful for that. Research opportunity. So how does research and donation work together? I'll give you a good example of this. I'm not able to use any names and I'm not able to use any specific locations, but I can share with you. We had a young man not that long ago who was diagnosed with a rare brain disorder. He had that difficult decision. What did he want to have happen when he passed away? So he sat down and had the conversation with his mom and dad. He told his mom and dad when he passed away, he would like to donate his brain to science. What a courageous thing that young man decided to do. That's the kind of hero I say I get to work with. So he passed away. Our researchers went out, recovered his brain. Harvard University is right now doing a study on that particular brain disorder. So we have a young man from this area who is part of the Harvard brain study. And because of his heroic decision, he could impact hundreds, thousands, or maybe even millions of people with what they discover. We also had a brain that we recently got out to UCLA. They're doing a similar research project. So we're working with researchers all the time. And then care and bereavement services. I think this is a really important part of what we do. Not only do we go out and recover things from people who have passed away, but we also stay in contact with donor families for a year and we help them through that grieving process. We have a team of professionals. They reach out to that family, maybe that first holiday they spend without their loved one physically being there, the birth date of their loved one, the death date. We help them through the grieving process. And I think that's nice to know that we just don't go in, do the recovery, forget about the family. We stay in contact with these families for up to a year. You might be surprised to learn how long this stuff's been going on. When I go out to high schools, I'll always ask the class, I say, how long do you think cornea transplants have been going on? Well, of course, for them, the 1970s is ancient. For me, it seems like it was just yesterday. But actually, cornea transplants have been going on since 1905. Here's the story. This happened in Czechoslovakia. Mr. Golgar, the bottom picture, he happened to be working at a chicken farm. Well, one day he was cleaning out a chicken coop, and they used lye for cleaning purposes back then. Well, he happened to splash some of that lye up into his right eye, and he scarred his cornea. He goes to the doctor. Doctor looks at him and says, I'm sorry, Mr. Golgar, I really don't think there's anything we can do. So they send him home. He's only able to see out of one eye. It wasn't long after that, the hospital hired this Dr. Zerm, fresh out of medical school. And one day he happened to be working to save the life of a 9-year-old boy. Now, the good news is he saved the boy's life. The bad news is the boy did lose one of his eyes. So this Dr. Zerm had heard about Mr. Golgar. So he gets together with Mr. Golgar, explains to him he would like to try something. He'd like to try to take the cornea from the eye that this young boy lost, and he'd like to try to transplant it into Mr. Golgar's eye. Well, Mr. Golgar had the courage to say yes. I don't know what they had for instruments back then, frankly. I don't want to know. But I just know that Mr. Golgar had the courage to say yes. It was a success, and it is now to the point where there are more cornea transplants done all around the world than anything else that is transplanted. When you become a designated donor, you yourself decide how much you'd like to donate. You can donate just your corneas if you'd like. I have a friend of mine whose dad passed away a couple of months ago. His dad made the decision he wanted to donate his body to the USD Medical School. Wonderful, wonderful gift. So you decide how much or how little you would like to donate. You just need to share that with your family. So here's why someone may need a cornea transplant. The first one is a corneal injury. Maybe somebody who works with metal. Maybe they're in a manufacturing setting. Maybe they're a welder and they get something in their eye. Or maybe they're a student and they're in a science class and they splash something in the eye. They don't get to the wash station soon enough. Good chance they're going to need a cornea transplant. The second one is called Fuchs dystrophy. This is the most common reason why someone may need a cornea transplant. Your cornea, the clear part to your eye, consists of 5 different layers. Well, sometimes the cells in that 5th innermost layer, sometimes those cells will die off early. So when that happens, someday you're going to need a cornea transplant. It's not going to be overnight. It'll be over a period of years. But someday you will need a cornea transplant. And then the next one is called keratoconus. That is a pressure imbalance in your eye. And that's hereditary. Picture your eye being shaped like a basketball. Well, for some people, because of a pressure imbalance, their eye is shaped more like a football and it can stick out. And it can get so bad that some people are actually unable to close their eye. So, what the eye surgeon will do then is they'll go in, they will remove the entire cornea, all 5 layers, and then they will replace it with a full cornea transplant. And when they do that, they will actually sew that cornea in by hand, 12 stitches, no more, no less. I don't know why it's 12 stitches. It's just the way it is. But 12 stitches, no more, no less. They sew it in by hand. So I'm sure when a surgeon knows he has that type of surgery coming up, he cuts back on the amount of coffee that particular morning. You don't want anybody with a shaky hand stitching in any corneas. This is what it looks like when our technicians come back from a recovery. Okay, I'm going to set this up. As I told you, every hospital in the United States has to have those 2 contracts. It's also regulation that every hospital, whenever there's a death, they must phone in that death within 60 minutes. It has to be less than 60 minutes. So then we get the call. We immediately check to see if that person was a designated donor. If they were, then we have coordinators who will immediately reach out to the family and get some family history, some medical history, social history, things like that. Things happen pretty fast when donation takes place. So what do you suppose happens if we check and we find out that the person who passed away wasn't a designated donor? What do you think happens in that case? Well, every single family who loses a loved one will be approached about donation. Because if someone in your family says, I think this is something maybe my son or daughter would have liked, or my mom or dad, or my grandpa or my grandma, that gives us permission to at least then go in and recover their corneas, which is our specialty. So if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, the most important thing I want to leave you with is if you decide you want to be a designated donor, hopefully some of you watching this already are, you've got to let your family know. You've got to let your loved ones know. Thank you for holding that up there. Very important, very, very important. And you can take your name off the list. You can put your name on the list whenever you want. Just realize it's not going to show up on your driver's license until you go to renew your license. But you can go to our website. There are a host of different websites. In fact, if any of you have iPhones, you could actually register on your iPhone right where you're at. It's part of the health app, which a lot of people aren't aware of, but it's actually part of the health app on the iPhone. We get the call. We are sent out to do the recovery. Most of the recovery will take place at the hospital, maybe at the funeral home. The extensive cases will actually bring the donor back to our office in Sioux Falls, where we have 2 surgical suites that can be used. But this is what the cornea looks like when the technician returns to the office. The middle part is the cornea. And then that white part around the outside, that is called the sclera. That's the white part of your eye. Now, research has also figured out a way to use the sclera. They can use it for certain eye surgeries. They've also figured out a way to use the sclera to repair punctured eardrums. So there, again, is a lot happening in the world of donation. So we're going to bring this back to our lab. And what they're going to do is they're going to put it underneath a microscope. This microscope is hooked up to a computer. In order for a cornea to be transplantable, it has to have a minimum of 2,000 healthy cells per square millimeter. You can't count that with the naked eye. Can't be done. So they're going to put it underneath this microscope, and they're hoping to see a picture like this. This is a picture of a healthy cornea. All the cells are pretty much the same shape and size. That's the kind of cornea you want. That's a good looking cornea. So if it meets the requirements, one of our eye techs will then take it in to one of our eye labs, their clean rooms. And this is all done surgically. I mean, everything is a clean room. It's very similar to what you're going to find in a hospital setting. But what they're going to do is they're going to process that cornea to however the eye surgeon would like it. It used to be where we would send out the entire cornea, all 5 layers, and then the eye surgeon would handle it from there and they would process it to however they would like it. Not the case anymore. 99% of all the processing takes place at our office. So they're going to process that cornea to however the eye surgeon would like it. Okay, here is a great example of how thin this tissue is. I told you that your cornea is 5 layers. That 5th innermost layer is the layer that's going to be recovered and sent out to the eye surgeon for transplant purposes. Your typical piece of paper is 100 microns thick. That part of the cornea that our technicians are working with is 5 to 10 microns thick. It's thinner than a strand of hair. So that is the part of the cornea that they will then remove from the other 4 layers. They will put a little blue coloring on it. They will actually stamp it to show the eye surgeon which side is out, which side is in. And then they will put it in what's called a Jones tube. And that's, of course, this picture is enlarged many, many times, but it's very, very small. They're going to put it in this Jones tube. And within 3 to 5 days after the person's passed away, their cornea, which they graciously decided to leave for someone else, is being transplanted into someone else's eye. Here's an animation of what the eye surgeon will do. What they're going to do is they're going to remove that 5th layer of the cornea that is discolored. Fuchs dystrophy. Remember, I talked about that. The cells die off early, things are going to cloud over. So what the eye surgeon will do is they will remove that part of the cornea. They will then insert the cornea that we sent them. They will put a bubble behind it, which is a combination of gas and air. It'll push that 5th layer up against the other 4 layers. And after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, everything adheres together. Your body will absorb that blue coloring. It'll also absorb that bubble. You'll be looking through the bubble for probably a week, week and a half. You have 20/20 vision. The most common transplant that's done all around the world. In fact, at the end of this presentation, I have an actual cornea transplant I'd like to show you. It's absolutely amazing. I don't know if any of you watching this know of anyone who happens to be on an organ transplant waiting list. Organ transplantation doesn't happen as often as people think. Out of every 1,000 people who pass away, only 3 people will qualify to have their organs recovered and transplanted to someone else. Most people will die from what's called cardiac death. Your heart stops. So when your heart stops, blood then stops flowing to your organs. When that happens, your organs can't be transplanted. They can still be used for research and education. They just can't be transplanted. You have to die from what's called brain death. And that results from a stroke, or an aneurysm, which is a brain bleed, or maybe you're in a bad accident and you suffer head trauma. You have to die in the hospital and you have to be hooked up to life support. A good example or a good comparison is if any one of you have ever sprained your ankle. When you sprained your ankle, what happened to your ankle? It swelled up, didn't it? Your ankle had to swell in order to heal. It's the same thing with your brain. If you suffer any brain injury, your brain has to swell in order to heal. But because of your skull, it can only expand so far, and then that's it. Well, sometimes when the injuries are significant enough, the pressure is going to continue to build in your head. And it can reach the point where your heart actually can't pump blood to the brain because of the pressure. It can still pump blood to all the organs, but it can't get to the brain. That's brain death. That's how you have to pass away in order for your organs to be transplantable. Doctors will see this happening. They'll run you through a series of tests. And if you don't pass, you are then declared legally dead. That's the day and time that goes on your death certificate, but they're going to keep you hooked up to life support. Okay. Right now, we have over 100,000 people in this country waiting for an organ. We get new numbers every Monday. I checked this morning. The number this week is 106,000. We have 106,000 people in this country needing an organ. Over 3,000 of those people live in these three states, South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota. So the chances of you knowing someone, or at the very least crossing paths with someone who's on the organ transplant waiting list, chances are pretty high. Just put yourself in those folks' shoes for a moment. We had over 3,000 people wake up this morning, shut off the alarm, and I'll bet you anything, one of the first thoughts that went through their head was, I wonder if today's the day. I wonder if today's the day my phone's going to ring and I'm going to be notified that I'm going to get that organ. Can you imagine starting off every day like that? Here are some other statistics. We're going to be together today, I don't know, roughly 60 minutes. Every 8 minutes, another person's added to that list. So if my math is right, just the time that we're visiting about donation today, 7 people will have their names added to that list, just the time that we're together. 16 people die every day in this country because they don't receive the organ in time. 2,000 are young adults under the age of 18. And 500 are kids between the ages of 1 and 5. And what makes that so difficult is you can't take an organ from an adult and transplant it into a child because it's not going to fit. So sadly, the organ has to come from another child. There are things known as living donation. That's where you can donate one of your kidneys to somebody else, or maybe part of your liver, because your liver will actually grow and start to work. But when you're talking about organ donation, complete organ donation, again, those are just some of the statistics. So this brings up the question, why aren't more organ transplants being done? Well, as I mentioned before, you have to die a certain way. And it doesn't happen as often as people think. Here's what brain death actually looks like. You see that top picture there, you see the healthy brain, all the blood flow. That bottom picture, that's a picture of brain death. There is no blood flow. There is so much pressure in that brain that the heart's unable to pump blood to the brain. It can still pump it to the organs, but it can't pump blood to the brain. So that's how you have to pass away. Doctors see it happening, and then the process begins. That's when they go out and they look for matches for that donor's organ. This organization called United Network for Organ Sharing, they work with the firm out of Minneapolis I referred to called LifeSource. And what they will do is they will then get on their computers and they're going to start looking for matches. Now, I want to point out it doesn't matter how much money someone has or how famous someone is. Some people actually believe that the rich and the famous bump to the top of the list. I am here to tell you, if later tonight we read online that Taylor Swift needed a kidney, Taylor Swift is not going to jump to the top of the list. She's going to wait with everyone else. What they factor in is how long that person's been waiting for that organ. If their blood type matches up, because you have to match up the blood type when you're talking about organ transplantation, where they're located, those sort of things are taken into consideration. Plus, there are time constraints. Now, the heart and lungs can only be out of the body for 6 hours. So if somebody passes away, let's say in Sioux Falls, and there's a perfect match for that person's heart in San Diego, there's no way the heart can be recovered, flown to San Diego, and then transplanted within that 6 hour window. It can't happen. So they're first going to start looking in our area. They're going to expand the circle. Hopefully, they'll find a match. Again, there's no guarantee. You see, you have more time to work with the further down the list you go. In fact, the kidneys are the most common organ that is transplanted. You have a full 24 hours. Now, I do want to let you in on something. There's a research project right now that Johns Hopkins University, they're trying out a new cooling system that may give doctors and transplant surgeons a couple more hours to work with when you're talking about heart and lungs. Again, it's a research thing. It's not being rolled out to the entire country yet, but they're trying it right now at Johns Hopkins University. This whole process of finding a match takes 24 to 36 hours. All right, now it is time. Now it is time for that donor to become what I call a superhero. I don't know if any of you watching this have ever worked at a hospital. Maybe you know of somebody who works at a hospital. Next time you are with them, ask them about the honor walk. I got to witness my first one about 3 years ago. And what happens is when all the matches are found and they're in their hospitals waiting for that organ to be delivered, the hospital will declare what's called an honor walk. They'll either send out a text message to all the employees or they'll announce it overhead. It'll say something like honor walk, 30 minutes, fourth floor. So anyone in the hospital who's available, doctors, nurses, administrators, secretaries, janitors. Again, I witnessed my first one 3 years ago. You all go to the fourth floor and you line the hallway from that person's hospital room all the way down to the surgical suite where they'll be taken off life support and their organs will be recovered and donated to complete strangers. It's a way of paying respects to that donor. It's also a way of saying thank you to the family because the family always follows behind. There are some honor walks. Sometimes the family will ask that the honor walk is recorded. I know there are a few of them up on YouTube, but usually it's just something family keeps to themselves. So it's a way of paying respects. You get to the doors of the operating room. The family's given a chance to say their goodbyes. And then once they get inside the operating room, even the transplant surgeons will observe a moment of silence. This is how big this is. When you're talking about surgical procedures at a hospital, this is towards the top. This is big stuff. So the recovery then takes place. It's a lengthy process. Those organs are then put in special containers. And then depending on where they need to go, maybe they'll be transported by ambulance, maybe by helicopter, maybe by airplane. Now, here's something else that happens every single day, but the general public doesn't know anything about it. We did it with the young man's brain that we got to Harvard or to Harvard University. Whenever an organ or tissue has to get somewhere real fast, you're going to fly it there, right? What we'll do is we'll go out and we will hand that organ or tissue to the pilot. Once the pilot takes possession of that organ or tissue, he or she becomes captain of what's called a lifeguard flight, which means they will have top priority in every single airport they're in. They will be the first to take off before any other flights. They will be the first to land once they get into that airspace. So even if you're flying into a big airport like Dallas or Atlanta, if it's a flight from Sioux Falls, they will be the first to land. Everybody else has to hold their position. And they will fly in the shortest possible distance from point A to point B. There is no curving around, none of this over the top. It is a straight line from point A to point B. Now, through my years of working with Dakota Lions Sight and Health, I have only ever met two people ever who knew they were on a lifeguard flight, because this is information that's only kept between the control tower and the pilots. Flight attendants don't even know about it. But in these two cases, the pilots got on the intercom system and said to the passengers, so you're all probably wondering, how in the world did we get to the airport so early? And the pilots explained that there was an organ up in the cockpit and it was going to be transplanted within a matter of hours. So the pilots asked for a moment of silence for not only the donor, but also the person who was going to receive that organ, which I think is a pretty cool thing for those pilots to do. But usually it's just the pilots and the control tower who know about it. So if you're ever flying anywhere, and if you get to your destination early, now I'm not talking 5 or 10 minutes early, I'm talking more like 40 or 50 minutes early, I'll bet you anything you were on a lifeguard flight. You just didn't know it. It happens every single day in this country. On average, there are 95 organ transplants done every day in the United States. I will guarantee you we have 11 or 12 happening in our region today. So there are lifeguard flights happening all the time. So if you're at the airport and if you hear the term lifeguard flight, that's the flight you want to be on, because you will make your connecting flight. I can promise you that. I do want to point out this is everything as of today that can be recovered and transplanted from the human body. Now, the organ side, as I said, a little more complicated, doesn't happen as often as people think. The tissue side, very, very common. There were over 2.5 million tissue transplants last year alone. In fact, I'm a recipient myself. About 3 years ago, I ripped the bicep off the bone. I wish I had a really cool story to share with you about how it happened. I'm, lifting too much weight or something, but not the case. I reached out to stop something from falling on the hood of my wife's car, and little did I know I'd be having surgery a few days later to reconnect my bicep. I actually have someone else's tendon in my arm holding my bicep in place. So I, for one, am very thankful that somebody checked that box, because now I'm able to use my left arm again. Now, I want to share with you, I told you how big research is. I want to share with you three more things that are now being recovered and transplanted. It's not done on a daily basis. It's very, very rare, but it's now being done. Check this out: hands, arms, and face. Researchers have figured out a way to take someone's entire hand or arm, reattach it to another person, reconnect all the nerves and tendons. That person will then have complete control of that arm. We actually, not many people know this, we actually had a face transplant in our area not that long ago. And I get to share the story with you because the families have given us permission to include it in our presentation. So here's the story. This young man here, he lives just on the other side of the Black Hills. He lives in eastern Wyoming. Well, sadly, one day he attempted suicide, and they got him to the hospital in Rapid City in time to save him. But as you can see, because of his decision, he lost a good portion of his face. So for several months, he traveled from his home in eastern Wyoming to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where they tried to rebuild his face with bone and cartilage from his legs, but it didn't work. Now, you have to go to the big hospitals for this sort of thing. We don't do any of this around here. Johns Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, those are the places that are doing this. So he traveled there, and what they were trying to do, they weren't having any success. So doctors sat him down one day and explained to him what was happening. And they also asked him, they said, now, we think you'd be a good candidate for this. It's not happening very often, but in rare occasions, doctors will agree to a face transplant. Is this something you think you might be interested in? He said, yes. Well, it wasn't long after that, this young man here from Southwest Minnesota, sadly, one day committed suicide. They got him to Sioux Falls in time to get him hooked up to life support, but his injuries were significant enough to where he was never, ever going to be able to survive without being on life support. So they're talking to his wife about him donating his organs. And while they're doing that, they're doing some measuring. Now, for a face transplant to happen, everything pretty much has to be identical: bone structure, measurements, everything. Well, guess what? He was a match for the young man who needed a face transplant. So they took his wife aside, explained to her that her husband had this really rare opportunity. They also explained to her, though, that if she said yes to this, she wasn't going to be able to have an open casket funeral, because when we go out and recover, everyone's always treated with dignity and respect. We always, what we call, restore the body. So if we recover corneas, put a cap over the eye, no one's ever going to know. If we recover bones from arms or legs, we put wooden prosthetics in there. It's a piece of wood you can lengthen or shorten. So it gives the funeral director something to work with there. But everyone's always treated with respect so the family can have an open casket funeral. In this case, he wouldn't be able to have that because you can't restore the face. She was okay with that. She said yes. She's a hero. Her husband's a hero. So they took her husband to the Mayo Clinic. Young man from Wyoming went back to the Mayo Clinic. Surgery took 56 hours, no breaks. There were 100 doctors and nurses involved. The first picture I'm going to show you is how he looked the day he checked into the hospital. Second picture you'll see is how he looked the day he checked out of the hospital. Is that not amazing or what? I do have to tell you, before the young man received his face transplant, he almost became like a hermit. He did not want to leave his house because you can only imagine what people were like when he went out to a restaurant or went out to shop. Didn't want to leave his house because somebody said yes to donation. He now has a whole new lease on life. That puffiness around his eyes, that has since gone away. There are two ways of doing a face transplant: behind the ears, which includes the ears, or in front of the ears. His was in front of the ears. Now, he had a chance to meet his donor's wife not that long ago. They actually met in Sioux Falls. I was so hoping to be there, but I was on the road that day. But one of my coworkers had the chance to be there when they met. And she came back and was telling us all about it. And she said, yes, there were some tears, but she said they were more tears of joy. She gave him the big old bear hug. After she gave him the bear hug, she asked if she could touch his face. And he said, yes. Look at that. He's even able to grow facial hair. Now, I'm going to share with you my favorite part of this story. I have told this story thousands of times, and it still makes the hair stand up on my arms. This really brings home the power of donation. I was at a meeting in Fargo not long after this face transplant took place, and sitting right next to me was a nurse actually involved in that case. And we got talking during the breaks, and she was telling me about all the different things that the hospital had to go through. Well, she also told me that when the young man, when they were trying to rebuild his face with his own bone and cartilage, he'd have to sometimes spend several nights at the Mayo Clinic, sometimes several weeks. While he was there was one nurse in particular who would usually take care of him and watch over him. Well, guess what happened? They have fallen in love. Just this last year, he proposed to her and she said yes. This is the perfect example of donation. That young woman that you see there, when she said yes to allowing her husband to be a face donor, okay, she knew she was going to impact the young man from Wyoming and his family and his co-workers and really his entire community. She had no idea she would be impacting the life of a nurse hundreds of miles away in Rochester, Minnesota. That is the power of donation. It's like when you drop a rock in water. We've all done it. You see those waves go out. We have no idea how far those waves are going to travel. It's the same thing with donation. You have no idea how many people you can help by saying yes to donation. I'm going to give you another example of the power of donation. Now, it doesn't matter how a person passes away, okay? You can help a minimum of 75 people just through eye and tissue donation. I want you to sit and think about that for a minute. No matter how you pass away, you can help a minimum of 75 people. Now, if you die from brain death, which we talked about. That means your organs then can also be transplanted. So that brings the total to 83. Think about that for a minute. Just by making a check mark on a piece of paper and sharing with your family that you want to be a donor. But sometimes you have those really rare occasions. We had a 19-year-old here in Sioux Falls, a 19-year-old young man who a while back was involved in a car bicycle accident. He happened to be on the bicycle. And they got him to the hospital, and they ended up having to hook him up to life support, and he ended up ultimately passing away from brain death. So doctors were having this conversation with his parents, and his mom and dad spoke up and said, we talked about this when he went through driver's ed. He told his mom and dad that if something were to ever happen to him, he would like to donate everything he could. So being he died from brain death, that meant that his 8 organs could be recovered. We came in and recovered corneas and skin and bones and nerves and veins and tendons and ligaments, and they got sent to processors all over the world, and they were processed into what's called grafts. Would you like to guess how many grafts that one young man was responsible for? You know, it's at least 83, okay? Do you think it was 100? Would you go as high as 200? Check this out. That one young man was responsible for 407 transplant grafts. And we know this for a fact. We have documentation because remember early on in the presentation, I told you that we stay in contact with donor families for a year. This young man's mom called Patty, who heads that department up for us, and said, Patty, I need your help. I know where my son's 8 organs went, but where'd everything else go? So Patty and some other folks in the office took it upon themselves to track down with every processor we work with around the world. It took some time, but we have documentation that that young man was responsible for 407 transplant grafts. His legacy is going to live on for a long, long time. That's the kind of hero that I get to say I work with. He is a superhero in my book. I could go on all afternoon sharing stories with you about how people have helped out complete strangers. I do want to point out that no matter what's recovered, everything's considered a gift. One is not more important than the other. So if somebody donates, say, corneas, that's fabulous. That's the most common thing that's donated. Somebody decides to donate kidney, heart, that's fabulous. But one's not more important than the other. They're all considered gifts in the world of donation. Everything's considered a gift. Now, I do have that video I'd like to show you, if you don't mind. Does anybody have any questions up to this point? I see we have a couple chats here. Had cataract surgery. You had cataract surgery. Do you have usable corneas? Absolutely. Your corneas weren't impacted at all. I had cataract surgery just last year. Do cornea transplants need to have similar blood types, genetic similarities? No, they don't. That is the most unique thing about corneas. There is no blood flow through the corneas. So we don't have to worry about matching up blood types. So anybody watching this presentation, I could take a cornea from any one of you, and if it met the requirements, I could have it transplanted into your eye, and we don't have to worry about that. Science has been able to come up with an artificial lens, but they've not been able to come up with an artificial cornea that actually works. So that's why the cornea it's in such great demand. I
Well,
mentioned that you have to have a minimum of 2,000 healthy cells per square millimeter. We've gotten kind of spoiled in this country. Most eye surgeons now in this country won't accept anything under 2,500. So if we have a cornea that we process that comes in at, say, 2,350, we're not going to be able to find an eye surgeon in the US that will accept it. So those are the corneas then that we work with a firm out of Tampa and Miami, and they will get those corneas to other parts of the world. We've sent corneas to 36 different countries out of our Sioux Falls office. They have to be transplanted within 14 days. That's the absolute longest you can go. So we usually go between 3 and 5 days here in this country. We can go a little longer overseas, but here in this country, we've gotten kind of spoiled. Anybody else have any questions before I show you the video?
my other question was about skin grafts.
Yes,
Blood flows through them, doesn't it? But it sounds like you could use them for a lot of people from
actually,
one
yes.
person.
But it's actually the part of the skin that we take that does not involve blood flow.
Okay.
It's a certain layer that we will take that's used. It's how's the best way to describe it? I'm hesitant to use a description that I've heard before, but it's let's just say it's part of the skin that it doesn't involve the blood flow. So we can
Okay.
take skin, and that's always taken off your back and the back of your legs, which again means that the family can still have an open casket funeral. Everyone is treated with the utmost dignity and respect. I've seen technicians say a little prayer over the body, and they will usually refer to them by their first name, and they will actually thank them for their donation when they're doing the recovery. It's really a moving experience. It takes a special person to do that job, and we have some of the best in the country. In fact, we just got information that the country's split in half. There's the west half and the right half, west and east. We're in the west, and when it comes to tissue, our office is number one in the country when it comes to tissue recovery. And so that's something we are very, very proud of. Are you
I have
guys ready? Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question that came in on direct message for you. It says, my mom donated her body to the USD Medical School. Is it better to do that or to donate parts of my body?
That is a decision that's made by that person. Maybe there's a connection to the USD Medical School. It's really an individual decision. When I go out and I talk to driver's ed classes, I tell them I'm not there to twist any arms to say, you better all promise me you're going to check that box. It's all an individual decision. Some people, no matter what their age, are still kind of weirded out by it. I completely understand. Now, here's another wonderful gift, and usually it's nurses that will do this. 99% of the time, when we have someone who says they want to be a teacher when they pass away, it'll be a nurse. What the nurse will do is they'll share with their family that they would like to be used as a teacher. Well, South Dakota and Minnesota and Iowa and North Dakota, this part of the country is pretty rural, and not every town can afford to have a full-time fire department or full-time EMT. Well, in rare occasions, if somebody decides they would like to be used as a nurse, we will bring the body to our office in Sioux Falls. We will invite in a limited number of volunteer fire departments and volunteer EMTs, and they will be given a couple of hours to actually practice and hone their skills, like putting in a breathing tube, IVs, that sort of thing. Because these are the people who are first to arrive on the scene of an accident. And so they better know what they're doing. And it's a wonderful, wonderful gift that 99% of the time, the person who decides to do it is a nurse. They will be given that time. They will then be released, dismissed, and then our technicians will come in and actually do the recovery. So it's again, a wonderful gift. It's all something you share with your family, how much or how little you would like to donate. So, any other questions? All right, here is the actual video. The first question I saw was, does having cataract surgery affect your corneas? And the answer is no. I need to set this up. Whoops. Oh, for some reason it's not working. Let me try it this way. Oh, wouldn't you know it? My computer is froze up, you guys. I'm sorry.
Do you
Okay.
have to do a new share, maybe?
I might have to. Let's do a new share. Yeah. Let's do a new share. All righty. Can everybody see that one?
Not yet.
Not yet. It says I'm sharing my screen.
Well, I'm still seeing the guy with the question mark.
Okay. How
So maybe you
about,
have to stop that share.
you know what? I might have to stop that. Oh, gosh. Okay. Now let's try this. Thank you for being so patient with me. As you can tell, I'm not the brightest bulb in the package when it comes to this stuff, but okay, can everybody see that?
I'm still seeing the guy with the question mark.
Okay. I've got an even better idea. I'm just going to back out of this. I'm just going to jump down here and I'm going to do it this way, the old-fashioned way. All right, can everybody see that? You still seeing the man with the...
I'm just still seeing you now.
Okay.
No, are you doing a new share?
Yep, I'm going to do a new share. Gosh, I'm so sorry, you guys.
That's all right.
This is where having a teenager in the room would be really beneficial. Okay, can everybody see that?
Aha, yes.
Okay, here we go. Start this. Okay, everybody can see that one screen, right? Okay, here we go. I'm going to set this up. There was a gentleman who used to actually do Ollie classes for us. Alberto is his name. Super guy. In fact, I talked to him just this morning, had a great conversation. We get together usually every 2 or 3 weeks. A few years ago, Al's son, John, was going to medical school at Duke University, going to be an eye surgeon. He contacted his mom and dad one day and said, hey, it's family weekend. Why don't you guys come down and spend the weekend with me? So Al and his wife, Joan, decided to go to Duke, spent the weekend with their son, John. While they're there, John says, hey, Dad, let me do a mock exam on you while you're here. So he did. Well, John discovered that his dad had the start of Fuchs dystrophy. Remember, we talked about that fifth layer in your cornea and the cells start to die off early. So John tells his dad, someday, Dad, you're going to have a cornea transplant. Not when you get home right away, but a few years down the road. Well, time went on. John ended up graduating, becomes a world-renowned eye surgeon now through Vance Thompson Vision here in Sioux Falls. He travels all over the world. And it got to the point where Al couldn't see. So John says, Dad, you're going to need that cornea transplant. And you have to get special permission for a family member to do surgery on you. So they agreed, and John then did the surgery on his dad. This is a picture of the clip of the actual cornea that was transplanted into Al's right eye. I want you to go to the bottom. You see there's a upper left-hand corner. It's 2,639. That's how many healthy cells there are per square millimeter in that particular cornea. That's a great cornea. Here's what they took out of his right eye. 573. Now, I don't see 573 cells up there. I see some chicken scratching, and that's about it. So as you can see, no pun intended, Al obviously needed a cornea transplant. He also had cataracts at the same time. Cataract surgery, very common. 50% of the population will have cataract surgery. I had mine not that long ago, and it was the best thing I ever did. Now I don't have to wear glasses anymore. I love it. So here's Al's eye surgery. I need to set this up first of all. Al, by the way, was awake when they're doing this. Now, when you go to the dentist and they give you Novocaine for your tooth, it's the same thing when you have anything done with your eye. They're going to put drops in your eye, which will numb it. But then they've got you on some pretty good drugs. So let's just say Al wasn't driving himself home after this surgery. His wife, Joan, made sure he got home. So the first thing that's going to happen is his son, John, is going to make an incision, and he's going to take out that cataract. Now, your cataract is the clouding of your lens. That's behind your cornea. So he's actually, what you see here is he's working behind the cornea. The color of this eye is going to completely change by the time we get done with this video. So what he's going to do is he's going to take it down the middle and separate it. And he's going to work it loose. And he's going to take a little vacuum and he's going to suck that out of there. Now, somebody asked Al once when I was with him, could you tell that something was going on? And he said, Yeah, I could tell. It's like when you hold your finger close to your eye. Can you see the fingerprints? No, you can't see your fingerprints. You can tell something's there. You just don't know really what. Well, it's the same thing here. He knew something was happening. So he's going to suck that cataract out of there. You can already see the eyes brightening up. So he's going to get that all clean. Now, that is the artificial lens that is going into Al's eye. You see that little line in the top, like a little fishing string? There's one in the bottom as well that's going to hold that in place. And so the doctor is going to get that lens exactly where it needs to be. And he's going to work it. Okay, now we're fast forwarding to where he's going to put in the cornea that we sent him. He already got the fifth layer out. He's got a little more of the cataract suck out. He's going to take that Jones tube, which we sent him, which includes the cornea. He's going to insert it in his eye. And now he has to get it to unscroll on its own because he can't touch it. Because if he touches it, he's going to kill all those cells. So he's got to get it to unscroll on its own by tapping it on the top and on the sides. He's going to get it to unscroll on its own. This whole surgery, by the way, took 17 minutes. That's it, 17 minutes. I think mine took, what did I hear, 8 when I had my both cataracts done. They run you through fast. They know what they're doing. I had mine done at the same place, Vance Thompson. So, okay, so now what he's going to do, he's got that fifth layer of that cornea where he needs to be. He's got to make sure he gets that bubble between the lens and the cornea. So now he's going to insert that bubble. It's a combination of gas and air. And it's going to push that fifth layer up against the other 4 layers. Okay. 17 minutes later, Al's being wheeled out of the operating room. Joan takes him home. He spends the rest of the day lying on his back because if he sits up to watch TV or read a book, that bubble, of course, is going to move. It's going to slide to the top of the head. So you got to make sure you lay still on your back. He spends the day lying, looking up at the ceiling, listening to music, puts a patch over his eye at night so he doesn't scratch it, goes back in to see his son the next morning. John looks at it and says, "Dad, it was a success." So that blue coloring that we added and the bubble, which is a combination of gas and air, takes about 1.5 to 2 weeks for your body to absorb that. So, for example, when I had mine done, you're looking through a bubble, but then your bubble will actually, the bubble goes down. It doesn't get smaller in the middle. It actually goes down. So you get to the point where you're halfway through the process and you're looking over the top of this bubble. And I kept finding myself leaning up like this, thinking I could see over the top of the bubble. And of course I couldn't. But about 1.5, 2 weeks later, your body absorbs everything. You have 20/20 vision. Al now will be turning 75 here shortly. He had both eyes done. You don't do both eyes at the same time. You do one eye, let it heal, then you do the other eye. He had both eyes done. He's going to be 75. He has perfect vision in both eyes, 20/20 vision. But that is possible because somebody said yes to donation. Somebody first checked that box. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is kind of a peek into the world of donation. Again, this is happening every day. Most people have no idea how donation works. They drive by our building across the street from where Ollie's located, and majority of people have no idea what happens behind those walls, the miracles that are happening each and every day. I do want to share with you one other little thing is I wish I had a picture to share with you. Our CEO last year, actually it was 2 years ago, it was shortly after COVID, decided to have trees painted on the walls on the inside of the building. And for every person who passes away and is a donor, Patty, who heads that up for us, will put a leaf up on the tree. We have trees full of leaves inside our office. We also give the family an opportunity to send a picture of their loved one if they'd like. We'll hang that up there as well. But if you're ever in Sioux Falls, if you ever have a chance to stop by, I'd love to give you a tour. But the tree, it's simply amazing. And now we had another tree recently painted in our conference area. And instead of leaves, we have butterflies on that one, and the butterfly signifies those who have made birth tissue donations. So
Just a quick question.
yeah.
How do you make sure you have checked the box?
Well, you can go to our website, dakotasite.org, donatelife.org. There are so many different websites you can go to. If you just typed in, how do I become a designated donor? It's going to take you to a website. And you then can check to see if your name's on the list or if your name is off the list. You can take it on, take it off whenever you want. If you decide to check the box while you are at the Department of Motor Vehicles, you'll see donor and a red heart in the bottom corner. Now, if you decide to check the box the day after you've been there, I do want to just point out that the state's not going to issue you a new license, okay? So you have donor and a red heart on it. You'll be walking around without that on your driver's license, but you will still be a designated donor. So the easiest way I would say is just go to our website, dakotasite.org, and at the very top, you'll see Become a Donor, and you'll click on it, and it'll take you exactly to where you need to go. It's very, very simple, very simple. Or if you have an iPhone, just go into your health app.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great questions. Anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it. I hope I've given you a little insight into what happens in the world of donation, but there are a lot of great things happening all around the world because somebody checked the box and agreed to be a designated donor and told their family. It's very, very simple.
Thank you, Chad, so much. It was, wow,
Yeah.
really good information.
Is your building on the north side of 60th?
Yep, on the north side. Yep, it's
Okay,
kind of got
right.
it kind of looks like an eye. Somebody, I guess, when they designed it, it was supposed to kind of look like an eye with the curved ceiling. And by the way, if anybody ever needs a speaker for anything, I love to go out and talk about what we do. I will, if somebody cracks the door that far, if I can get my foot in the door, that's all I want. That's all I ask for. So if anybody is involved with any organizations and if you need a speaker, please reach out. I'd love to visit your organization. Anything else? Thank you, folks. I sure appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so very much.
You bet. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Chad.
Yep. Bye, Thea. See ya.
Bye. See you soon.
Hey, Thea.
Yeah.
This will be going on our YouTube site. Is this anyway? This
Sure.
could be public.
Probably, yeah. I can check. Yeah. I'm not sure how
Okay.
Stacy works the magic. I'll have to ask her.
All right. All right.
Alright.
Thank you. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody have a great day.